Time in about the 1966 period, whites had become economic giants in America. They owned and controlled everything at that point in time. Black folk didn't own anything. Whites controlled almost 100% of all the wealth, the income, the privileges, the businesses, the resources, and all levels of government. Blacks had nothing. Blacks were 1-foot midgets. And they allowed us then to use integration to walk from our communities, from our ghettos, over in their communities, totally disarmed, not understanding anything, blind, naked, and then saying that you can go and compete. Compete with what?
What's going on, family? I'm just here to remind you that you can get yourself a copy of my new book, On the Shoulders of Giants, Volume 4, The Caribbean, by visiting my website, www.ontheshoulders1.com, and help support me as I continue on my mission to make sure that my people have our information, even though, there are many people trying to stop us from learning our history. But hey, we can teach ourselves, and one of the tools we can use is my new book, On the Shoulders of Giants, Volume 4, The Caribbean. Remember, visit my website, www.ontheshoulders1.com, to get your copy, and I appreciate your support.
Hold up. We are back in the building. What's up, family? Welcome to this On the Shoulders of Giants YouTube channel. For all of my returning viewers, how y'all doing? I love y'all. Appreciate the support. For all the new viewers, what's up? Welcome to On the Shoulders of Giants. I'm Joseph Ward. He's Patrick Irvin. And when you see us together, you already know that we are about to bring you another breakdown. Make sure you visit my website at www.ontheshoulders1.com, like you saw in the intro, and everything can support your homeboy and everything that we have going on. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/OTSOG. Got a lot of good information, a lot of exciting things going on, and some new things coming along. So y'all make sure y'all stay tuned. Thank you to everybody who are watching the videos, the clips, the shorts, and engaging in the community posts. Appreciate everything that you got going on. And make sure you support my homie Pat, and she get a copy of Pat's book, The Chasm. Real quick, Pat, or real long, tell them about your book, The Chasm. Link in the description.
You can get it on Amazon. Type in The Chasm by Patrick Irvin. It'll come up. It looked like that. It's a book that was written a number of years ago, talking about the differences or the growing divide between black men and black women in America, and it also goes into some ways we can close that divide. So that's The Chasm. Go check it out on Amazon.
Yep. So let's get into it. So last week we did a breakdown of Sister Shahrazad Ali. The title of it was, "Is This the End of Black Love?" Where we talked about a lot of the issues and the breakdown of the black family over the years. One of the main questions we asked was slavery. What contributed mostly to the breakdown of the black family? Was it slavery? Was it the Jim Crow was it Jim Crow welfare state and all of the other things that happened during that time? I appreciate the engagement and the interaction in the comments, and make sure you keep respectful comments coming. But we know everybody ain't gonna do that. But shout out to all the comments though, because the comments help the algorithm, and the likes. Thank you for all the likes. So make sure you like the video and everything. So this week we getting on to, well, we're doing a breakdown of Dr. Claude Anderson. He's talking about inappropriate behavior within the black community and our issues with our wealth and our finances that we've been having for a minute. So yeah, let's get into it.
Into this underclass structure, first of all, are the legacies of slavery and Jim Crowism. We are still bearing the burdens and the scars. They were never corrected. That's one of the failings of our leadership in this country. They had the nerve, the audacity to let black folks suffer for 460 years. And at the end of the civil rights movement, rather than going back and saying, let's find out what has happened to black folk for 460 years. Have they been psychologically, emotionally, politically, educationally damaged? Nobody spent 1 minute of time trying to figure out what had happened to black folk over all that period of time.
Stop it right there. Because he started off by talking about black people being basically conditioned into a permanent underclass. White America has always placed themselves over black America. White people have always lived and existed and thought as black people as second class citizens. Statistically, and economically we're operating on the third class citizen level. So one of the things that Dr. Claude Anderson has been talking about for the last 40 to 50 years is if black people, we don't get our stuff together economically, as well as a group of people who are operating together, that we're going to, like he started off saying, we're going to be socialized into a permanent underclass. He also talked about the Hispanic population passing the black population. I don't think he says it in this, but he talked about the Hispanic population passing the black population in numbers, and the Hispanic population have passed us. And we're going to be able to look at some numbers later on to kind of see economically where we stand. But when you talk about black people being socialized into an underclass, and then all of the trauma and everything that we've talked about in previous breakdowns, especially with Dr. Francis Cress Wilson and Dr. Joy DeGroot, talking about all the trauma that black people have experienced. So all this is going on, unchecked trauma, unhealed trauma. And this is, I guess, it's presenting itself in inappropriate behavior and how we carrying ourselves, how we operating as a group, how we operating as individuals within ourselves and with other groups. And the outcome hasn't been favorable because our society, our communities are declining, our families are in a constant decline, and economically we're not doing good.
Yeah, I would also like to add that it's actually, in terms of what I'm about to say, it's worse than he presents, because he says nobody spent one iota of time trying to figure out uh, what the effects of slavery have been, and that's actually not true. There have been a number of government mandates, federal government mandates, congressional panels, a number of other things just in the past 10 years or so that have been put out there and put together to try to figure out the long-term effects of slavery. The what makes it worse is, even with all of this information, not to mention the independent scholars and the independent black historians that have gone out and taken it upon themselves to produce this information, there's still no political willpower to do anything about it.
Right.
So there is, at this point, I would say a extensive, but definitely a growing body of knowledge and body of work that talks about what the long-term implications of slavery has been. There's just nobody doing anything about it.
Right. Right. Now, let me ask you, because you said the studies that have been put out to show what happened to black people during slavery. You say those happened within the last 10 years?
There have been, I'm thinking particularly when they started talking about um the uh the reparations. This was
Mm-hmm.
maybe 4 or 5 years ago when reparations really caught on. Back when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote his piece on it in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
They actually put together a panel that year. Congress put together a congressional panel that year filled with scholars and activists and whatnot to look at what the long-term ramifications of slavery had been, and ways that reparations needed to be made to make amends
Okay.
for those dangers. And
So,
it's not just that panel. There was a panel, I want to say 2 or 3 years before that. That was a congressional panel. And there was a panel maybe 4 or 5 years before that. That was again another congressionally put together panel specifically to address slavery in America for black people.
okay. So I believe this lecture was given before that. So at that time,
No, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to put the
Yeah.
context just for, because you already know.
No, no, no,
So
right.
so
So
put context at that time, Dr. Anderson was true, but now where we speak here in 2022, that's not true anymore, because studies have been put out
right, right, right,
to show
right.
what has happened to us.
So So let me say it now out of my
Yes.
own mouth. When Dr. Claude Anderson first started pumping his message, and he's had the same message for 40, 50 years.
Right.
When he first started pumping his message, the statement he made was
Was
true.
true. Right.
There was nobody that had any level of prominence, anyways, any level of notoriety or a platform of any measurable size that had done this kind of research. But since he said this, in the last 10 years or so, there have been a number of congressional panels put together to study this issue. We good? Are we good?
Right. But
It don't matter. They gonna launch off anyways.
hey, but all of that has to be taken into account and taken into context of what happened to black people and why we behave the way we behave. Because as you can see, every week we have to talk about that, why we behave the way we behave. So like you said, there have so lately, as of late, as of within, let's just give it within the last 10 years, panels have been put together to examine what happened to black people, but nothing still has been put into place to correct what has happened to black people.
Right, and let me clarify. Let me say this about these panels. Two of those panels that were put together, I'm not even aware of whether or not they actually put out any return. I just know that the panels were put together.
Right.
And
Right.
for the last panel, it did put out a return, but there was no action taken on the suggestions made by the panel.
So, but on the other end of that, there's nothing stopping us as black people from examining on a wide scale level what has happened to us. There's nothing stopping us from putting our own panels together, because we do have fractions and factions of people and individuals who have put together information, who have gathered information to examine and to study and to let us know what happened to black people. But on that large scale, it hasn't been put together like that. But there's nothing stopping us. So those are things that we can do. Yes, it's been examined on the individual level, and yes, we should be examining ourselves on the individual level. But from the scale that we're talking about, to be able to move forward, especially for us to operate as a group better so our economics can improve. That hasn't been done, but nothing's stopping us from doing it.
Right. And for those of us that are doing it, or those of you that might be listening to this and might be thinking about doing it,
Do
it
it.
would be in your best interest for your mental health and your future outlook to try to think of solutions to the problems that you find that the black community can implement on its own.
And hey, email us. Go email us. We could talk. If you thinking of solutions, that's the whole thing. It is we need to get together and put our minds together. So if you have ideas and solution, email us on the shoulders, the number one, on the shoulders one at gmail.com. Email us. We can talk about it. Let's put our minds together. But that's the whole thing of doing these breakdowns so we can come up with actual solutions for what we're doing. Gonna make sure we say that every week so we know we're doing this to think of solutions. Because we go back and watch these videos. I go back and watch these videos and sit down and think and take notes and say, okay, how can we do this, this, and this, and this, so we can incorporate these things into our daily lives as individuals and as a group. So, yes, that's where we are. So let's keep going.
So in the course of the civil rights movement, the end of it, they say, well, let's pretend that nothing has happened to them, that they were not injured, they were not hurt. And now let's go seek integration and pretend that we're all equal. Now that was grossly unfair, because by that point in time, in about the 1966 period, whites had become economic giants in America. They owned and controlled everything at that point in time. Black folk didn't own anything. Whites controlled almost 100% of all the wealth, the income, the privileges, the businesses, the resources, and all levels of government. Blacks had nothing. Blacks were 1-foot midgets. And they allowed us then to use integration to walk from our communities, from our ghettos, over in their communities, totally disarmed, not understanding anything, blind, naked, and then saying that you can go and compete. Compete with what?
Stop right there. We talk about a lot how integration did not help the black community in the long run. And that's one of the things he's talking about. Black people barely owning one half or 1% of the wealth in America before integration. And then we integrate into white America, who own most of the wealth in the country. We give up our own and integrate into theirs, and have been fighting ever since to fit in while neglecting our own. And then we come back now. Now we come back in 2022 talking about closing the wealth gap. But it's like it's like we're supposed to close the wealth gap. It's like fighting somebody with both of our hands and both of our feet, and our hands bound, our feet bound, and we're blindfold, and we're supposed to fight this person and win this fight. But we're at a great disadvantage. And one of the reasons we're at a great disadvantage is we gave up a lot of our leverage and we gave up a lot of our wealth looking to integrate into white America. We can all look at our own cities. We can all look at the cities, the black communities and black cities within the states and the areas that we live in, and see some of the remnants and hear the stories of what they used to be before integration. And you can't be a group of people who barely own any wealth, who choose to give up the little that you do own to be a part of the masses, and then you have no real outcome. Because I said before, I said again, we pretty much depended upon white America for our survival, because we as a whole, we own literally nothing. There are individuals who have things, but that don't account when, especially, racism is a team sport. So, all right, you the person on the team who out there balling, but we losing every game. It don't count for nothing. Your stat sheet look good, but you ain't gonna never get to reach the heights that you need to reach, because the team itself isn't together. The team ain't winning.
Yeah. And what he's saying is still true today.
It's too true. That's the sad part.
White people still own over 95% of all the wealth in America. According to the last Federal Finance Consumer Report that I looked at. And so there are two things I want to address here. Because you talked about integration, and I think integration is so key, and we've been having this conversation for a long time now, and I still am amazed at the way people use certain terminology. Integration would have been great if that had been what we did, but we didn't integrate; we assimilated. And when you read the historical textbooks written by white scholars, not all of them, but a good chunk of them that I've read, anyways, they don't speak about integration. They speak about assimilation being the goal. Integration is something that was thrown out to make it look and feel better. But integration is what happens when you make room for something else inside of something. You make room for that thing to continue to be whatever it is in all its uniqueness inside of whatever the larger thing is that it's going to become a part of. Assimilation is when you take something that's foreign and you make it just like what you are. And that's essentially what happened. We had to give up everything. Well, we didn't have to. We chose to give up everything in order to become a part of something. And so with that frame of reference, with that perspective in mind, of course we lost everything, because integration was never the goal. Assimilation was for them. Integration was for us. Assimilation was for them. They got what they wanted and then just told us that we got what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so the other piece of that is, comparatively speaking, we're still a 1 foot midget, and that's what we're gonna be. All right, white people have had too much of a head start for us to start comparing and competing with them. But one thing we can do is use the resources we get to better ourselves and make things, not even close the gap, but make things better for us internally in
Yeah.
whatever ways we can,
Yeah.
using the means that we have available to us. At this point, trying to compare to white people would be like you trying to work on your hops so that you could win a jump ball with Prime Shaq. He's just too tall. It's too much advantage there. But you can work on your hops so that you can jump higher than you could 3-4
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah. Last year, so the CNBC report that came out last year, that black people, so the and I don't like this word, but the spending, the so-called spending power that Black America has increased. So we're spending more money, but our net worth decreased 14% because we're spending more money and we're not saving money. We're not investing money. We're not doing what we need to do to grow our own individual wealth. That, for all the people who are focused on the wealth gap, that's not going to help close that gap. That helps widen the gap. We can't, right now, we're aiding in our own demise, right? Basically, we're doing it to ourselves on that end. Nobody's making us buy the brands, nobody's making us do all these things. Um, we're not supporting the businesses that we have. These are simple fixes that we can do. Just support the Black businesses that you have. Save your money. You don't have to travel every month. You don't have to try to keep up with the Joneses. You don't have to try to keep up with people on social media. Invest your money. Save your money. Make your money grow. Make sure your money can be passed down. Make sure your money is an asset, is turned into assets, and it can be passed down to the next generation. I'm not saying you have to go out and try to be the richest person in the world, but what I am saying is you got to hold on to the change that you have and grow it, and so you can pass it down. And if we're not doing that, stop talking about the wealth gap, because it's never going to close. It's going to keep getting wider.
Yeah, and see, at this point, back to the analogy he used and the one I used, the only way to close the wealth gap would be a direct transfer of wealth from white
Yeah,
people to black people.
yeah, that's
At
not
this
going to happen.
point, that's where we're at. Like, if you dreaming of something else, no, at this point, the only way to close the wealth gap is to transfer money from white people to black people, and then to have black people not transfer it back.
Well, and that'll be the thing. That's been one of the reparation jokes for a while.
Right.
Is if you give Black people reparations, all we're gonna do is spend the money and give it right back, because everybody understands. We're in our late 30s, and all of our life, people have talked about how if Black people get reparations, we're gonna give it right back. And think about the credit jokes. Black people don't have no credit because we we don't take finances serious. We don't take our money serious. We don't take wealth serious. It sounds good, the buzzwords and all these things. Yes, the buy black movements and all these things. Yes, we want Black people to be doing these things, but it can't just be a social media thing. Us losing 14% of our wealth last year showed that most of us are online just talking. You're just
Yeah.
talking because we lost wealth as a whole. We lost wealth. If we were really serious about building wealth, we were serious about generational wealth and closing these wealth gaps and things, we wouldn't have lost 14% of our wealth last year. And as time goes, the wealth is declining more and more year after year because we're talking. And we're talking, and we see a minority of people doing these things, and we try to act like that's everybody. It's not everybody. The statistics are proving it. We got to do better. Easy step is to change our relationship with money. Money works for us. We don't work for money. We're not putting all this damn time at these jobs and doing all these things just to get the money and spend it. We have to get the money and grow it.
And the other aspect of that too, because I want to address it, because I know a lot of people will hear what you said and they'll say, "Yeah, but COVID." Well, the 2050 report was put out in 2016, before COVID, and
The
that report,
2053 report, yeah.
yeah, and that report showed that, barring any drastic measures, Black people would have a net wealth of zero by
In
2050.
2053.
Yeah, in
Right.
2053. So that was before COVID. So this isn't just now. COVID made things worse. The
It
number has
sped it up.
probably moved. The year has probably moved up some
Right.
because of COVID. But the other thing is, we got to be real about when we're looking at places like Black Wall Street. When you look at places like Durham and Raleigh and a lot of these Black Wall Streets, Tulsa, that we look at, even in those places, the Black wealth is concentrated. The majority of those communities were living in poverty. They had a lot of businesses, they had a lot of successful, thriving Black people, but the majority of those communities were still broke. So those also they can be models of a thriving Black business sector, sure, and they should be. But when it comes to, if we're beginning to talk about monetary gain and financial improvements for the collective, We got to look at a different way of doing that, one that allows everybody that wants to thrive to be able to at least have the
Right.
opportunity to thrive.
Right.
And that requires us putting together a model that I don't believe has been seen in America.
Right. Right. I mean, you know, Dr. Anderson wrote Powernomics. I mean,
Yeah.
many people have read it, implement the information that's in Powernomics. Black labor, white wealth laid out the foundation and information of what happened to us and how we got into this financial hole. Powernomics is how to get out the hole. Apply the information that's in the book. Yeah, so let's move forward.
And that's what the whole thing will be about this morning. You got to change the way you're seeing and thinking and behaving. Why? Because I said we've been locked into an underclass structure because we got two major problems in America. One problem is that maldistribution of wealth and resources I told you about that's in South African America where whites own and control everything. That's your number one problem. The second problem we're going to talk about this morning is the inappropriate behavior pattern of black folk. Those are the only two problems you have. I don't care what anybody else talks about in America. It's not worthwhile wasting your time. The problem in America is not drug abuse, crime, low-income housing, public housing, food stamps, welfare, teenage pregnancy. Those are symptoms of a problem. The symptoms are the fact that you don't own and control anything to run you and control your lives. That's the problem. And the second thing is inappropriate behavior pattern. A black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means where one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resource that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never in the history of this earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources and where they can have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites.
So, inappropriate behavior and that maldistribution of wealth. Slavery made America the economic juggernaut that it is.
Mm-hmm.
White people own and control most of that wealth, if not all of that wealth. I believe Dr. Anderson said this in the past, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but the height, I think the most of the wealth in America black people have owned maybe have been 2%. Maybe 2%.
Yeah, there was a period of time black people owned, I want to say 2.7% of the total wealth in America.
And so, but even thinking about that and going back to what you're saying about the black towns who we look at like Black Wall Street, when you own that little amount of wealth, everybody not going to have an opportunity to face wealth. So you got to think about that. But that maldistribution of wealth really hurt us. But our inappropriate behavior is what's really hurting us more. And I like that he said that poverty and crime, all these things are symptoms of the problem, which we know they are. And a lot of times, one of the things that frustrate me in doing community work is we do spend a lot of time working on the symptoms and not the issue. And you know, you'll have gun violence and they'll do a march. They have a town hall. But the gun violence never slows down. But they do a march in the town hall. We're locked in a pattern of doing things that make us feel good about working on the symptoms, but it don't actually treat the symptoms or the issue that's causing the symptoms. And so therefore we're going to continue to have inappropriate behavior, which is also going to continue to affect the wealth that we have, because inappropriate behavior means we have no discipline, we have no structure, we're not even thinking about it as a whole. They're just talking points. That's not what we're living. We have to live this. I do my best to try to live what I say. I'm not saying I'm perfect, and I'm not saying 100% of the time all this. So don't try to hold me to the task of perfectionism, but I try my best to live what I say. I try my best to practice what I preach. I try my best to take the information that I have and use it to better my life and my situation. But it's like everybody has to do that. And when your behavior is inappropriate, when your behavior is not on par as a group, as a whole, we can stop talking about what we trying to do if we're not serious about changing our behavior. It's like people who say, "Hey, don't say the N word anymore. I don't like that word. Don't say the N word." But then you ask them, "Okay, we can stop saying the word, but what about the behavior?" And they have nothing to say for it. They can't say nothing. Well, you don't want to change the behavior? Well, no. They tell some people have told me no. I'm not concerned with the behavior. I'm concerned with them saying the word. I'm like, well, don't you think the behavior contributes to them saying the word? Don't you think the N-word behavior is worse than just saying the word? Like we're living like that, we're existing like that. It's destructive behaviors, and you cool with that? You cool with that just as long as your feelings ain't hurt or you don't feel some kind of way because the person is saying the word. We got to switch our mindsets.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting parts about this is there's so much. So I want to address a couple things. One, um, every time you hear black people can't be racist, a debate starts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I clear up the nuances for this debate simply put like this. All right. Black people can't practice racism,
Mm-hmm.
which is what he was saying.
Right.
When you talk about power control and this, that, and the third, and yes, we understand that there were periods before America was developed where African nations held power and sway over the world. So we get that. All right. But when he's talking about black people can't be racist, I interpret that to mean black people can't practice racism
The
against
system of
white
racism,
people in America.
systematic
Systematic
racism.
racism. Right.
Right.
Now, can black people have a superiority mindset that says that black is superior to white and therefore white is inferior to black and therefore black should have better positioning and better this and better that? Sure. If that's the position you want to take as to mean racist, then yes, black people can be racist in that sense. But can they practice systemic
No.
procedural racism?
How we gonna do that when we done lost 14% of the wealth? We can't even hold on to the wealth we have. How we gonna practice racism?
Well, I'm just addressing
I know. I just had to say that like that though. It just hit me. I just had to say it.
just addressing the debate that always comes up. So really, you begin to argue about things that don't really matter at the end of the day. All right, because the point that's being made here is black people don't have enough power to discriminate against white people. Black people do have enough power to discriminate against other black people, and we do
Right.
that all the time.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so I wanted to, I just wanted to um talk about that for just a second.
Nah,
Um,
but I'm glad you did hit on that. So that way we can make sure both of us hitting on what he said. But um I agree. I agree. Systematic, we don't have the power, the resources, the might, the wealth, the respect, or nothing of that to practice systematic racism to oppress any other group of people. Hell, we don't have the resources to oppress other black people. We could be, we could have racist actions towards other black people or racist
yeah.
esque actions toward, but hell, we don't have the infrastructure or the means to oppress ourselves.
Yeah,
C-
yeah, we can discriminate against each
Right,
other,
right.
but we can't oppress each
And be
other because we
and
don't have no power.
because people have to understand too, like I know because I know the word oppress get thrown out a lot, especially when we're talking about like SV in relationships. But you can't escape oppression. You have to defeat it.
Hmm.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand. So you're throwing these words out as if just because you throw it out and it sounds good to you, that what you're saying is correct. But you can't escape oppression. You can't choose to leave oppression. You have to defeat your oppressors.
If
And
you can leave oppression, then you aren't. That's not true oppression.
right, 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 right. So think about that when you're talking about whether black people can practice systematic racism or not. Think about that.
But the other thing I want to point out here is, like the what you said. I agree with it. I think the problem we have is the models are broken, and this goes back to being critical and really examining the models that we're using to fight back. And
Yeah.
this requires us to touch on subjects that people don't like to touch on. We can celebrate everything that happened in the civil rights era, and we should be very proud and celebratory and all of these other things, but we should also be analytical and critical so that we don't fall back into making the same mistakes. You can recognize the greatness of something while also analyzing and learning from the flaws of that thing. The problem with a lot of the civil rights movement, the tactics that were employed, is that they were tactics taken from fights that empowered groups of people had within themselves. So, for instance, the Gandhi movement, right? And that system in which Gandhi was choosing to boycott the British and all of those other things that he chose to do that Dr. Martin Luther King patterned a lot of his stuff after, he was doing that in India, where they were the dominant group.
And
Numerically, financially, power, they were the dominant group.
and there was caste systems that had resources.
Right. And the other end of that is once they hurt the British, they didn't turn around and start repatriating British establishments.
Right.
So, for instance, if we want to, so we'll go back to the Montgomery bus boycott.
Yep.
That's one of the most successful things in the world for a year and a half before we decided failure. And the
Yeah.
reason I say that is for a year and a half, for over a year, we made the decision to find other means to get around.
To
And
do
we
it,
were
to do for self.
right, we were successful at it. And then at the end of everything, we stopped doing what we were doing for ourselves to go back to the very system that was oppressing us or that was mistreating us. That is the problem with Black liberation struggles at their core. Everything is geared towards getting the power structure to play nice
Right.
instead of growing and developing power on your own. And that's why it never works long term.
You have to become powerful and kick ass to be respected in this world. Show me a nation of people who ain't kicking ass and taking names that's disrespected. If you ain't doing what you're supposed to do, if you're not standing up and defending yourself and being tough out here in this world, this ain't no Disney movie. This ain't none of that. This is the real world. This is a ruthless place. This world is a ruthless place. And if you want your respect, you got to take it. And that's what we got to do. Like you're saying, we know the potential we have, but we keep I, I, I feel it seems like we're satisfied with just understanding our potential instead of realizing our potential. We we keep saying how powerful we are, how powerful we can be. Well, damn it, let's do it. Let's do it. See this book, Powernomics. It's this book, Powernomics. There's solutions in this book. There are solutions in the use the book. Use the book. The man been giving us solutions for the last 40 years. People ain't really been using them. Black America as a whole ain't been using. Everybody's celebrating Dr. Anderson, but damn it, crack open the book and use the concepts. That's what we got to do. Like nobody going to respect us if we keep operating the same way we operate. They not.
Well, again, it goes back to the being critical about the situation. Black people have a lot of potential, but we don't have power. Right. And
Right.
that's exactly what you said. I just want to say it more bluntly. Black people in America are powerless right now because we choose to be.
Yeah, say
Not
that
because
again.
some
Say that again.
yeah, we're powerless because we choose to be. Not because somebody has is keeping us from exercising our power, but because we choose not to exercise our power. And that's not a statement ignorant of all the systemic issues that we have here in America. That's a statement that is rooted in a firm understanding of the decisions that Black people have made in mass on a day-to-day basis for the last few decades.
But we haven't given them a reason. We haven't given them a reason in a long time to look at us as a threat. We haven't given them a reason in a long time to look at us as a problem or a group of people that you need to keep an eye on in mass. You need to neutralize these people. That you got certain individuals here and there, but for the most part, they're not doing that because we are not a formidable opponent anymore. But we can rectify that by just making the choice to do different and to do better in our individual lives and as a whole. I'm not saying you live in one side of the country, you try to take over the country. Start, and we're gonna keep saying start in your community. If you just take care of your community, take care of your household, take care of your community. If everybody around you and around us chooses to do that, it's gonna be a domino effect, and we can see the improvement in us. But ain't nobody gonna do a damn thing for us. We're gonna have to do it all ourselves.
And to add to that, one other thing, the buy black movements, I agree with them, but it's not far enough. Not only do we need to be buying black, the black institutions that we support, we need to make sure that they're supporting
Right,
black institutions and black organizations as well. It
right,
don't do no good. So we gotta, that goes back to the conversation we said we had a few weeks ago about black America exists in an unnatural place because we're not a naturally created people. So we have to be intentional about the way we do things. That means that we have to take extra steps. While you might not want to have to do your due diligence on the black people you shop with, you
we got
do
to.
have to do your due diligence
We got
on
to.
the black organizations you shop with.
All skin
Also,
ain't can.
you also need to do your due diligence because there's quite a number of white people out here setting up black companies and taking your money.
Yeah. So we got to be able to protect what we build. All any momentum that we create moving forward, we got to be able to protect it so we can continue to move forward. Because we already know how white people operate, how white America operates. White America is gonna try to squash any threat. Shit, let's become a threat. But let's make ourselves a formidable opponent.
So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century when you began to commercialize slavery against blacks. That's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing, and before I get into my presentation, you got to understand racism also comes from the word race. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about now, you cannot prove racism because somebody fired you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism, because racism does not apply to an individual. It applies to a group. Mm-hmm. And because I discriminate against you, that's individual, that's personal. It's not group-based, and so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, remember...
Hello, but I love that he said that because he's talking about the evolution of racism and because these people ain't crazy. So individual things are happening. So you got a whole bunch of individual things that are happening, sporadic individual things that are happening. Those of us who know what's going on, we know what the underlying foundation of this is, but the way it's presented is going to, like you say, like he said, it's going to be hard to say this is based on systematic racism. It could be just that individual doing that because they are smart. They understand the evolution of it. They have to keep this system moving. We have to stay 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 steps ahead and understand that, yeah, that's an individual act, but we know it's connected to a systematic purpose.
Right. And I think one of the things we have to do to counteract that is something that we've talked about again for years. The individualization of the movement of oppression, of discrimination, the say her name, his name movements. Those don't work for proving racism.
Right. Right.
And that's
Right.
why people are able to say, well, it was one bad cop, it was one bad situation. We got to get now. I understand, and this is where organizers and leaders have a balancing act to do, because putting a personal touch on it is what galvanizes people. It's what stirs up the emotions, but it's
But still,
also what moves you off your spot when it comes to fighting systemic issues. So those of you that want to be leaders in the field and whatnot, You need to know when it's time to put a name on it and when it's
Yeah.
time to throw these stats out and let people see that it's a bigger picture, a bigger narrative at work here.
Now,
And that part is definitely missing.
one of the issues though that I see a lot is a lot of black people don't know the statistics.
Right. That's exactly
And
what I'm getting at.
and we operate off of emotion and narratives that we can't prove. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a because black people who are now seen as social justice warriors who are in a debate with somebody from somewhere, and the black person is getting their ass tore up in the debate because they came to the debate with emotions and no statistics, no information, no evidence, none of this, to be able to prove what they're saying, to be able to properly articulate what they're saying. And now this person is making them look stupid when all you had to do is do your research and make sure you know what you talk about before you talk about it. If you ain't got your research together, you ain't got your information together, don't jump into the argument, don't jump into the debate, because you're gonna get squashed. But we have done ourselves a great disservice by not knowing the information, not knowing the evidence, not knowing the facts, the statistics. So racism or attempts at proving racism are being debunked and being squashed. So it's like to the point now where you have a whole section of people who are like, well, racism doesn't exist. Racism isn't an issue. Now, we're not facing the same type of racism. We're nowhere near the same type of racism our foreparents did, but there's still underlining racism that's going on. Now, I will still continue to say that the N-word mindset is one of our biggest issues. Like you said, the inappropriate behavior. We've been saying that the N-word issue, but we know what the foundation is. We know the underlying issue with that. Racism is the underlying problem of all things that's messed up in America. But we have to do a better job of knowing the information, having the information, and articulating the information so we can really set a proper foundation. Because a lot of people who are trying to defend us can't defend us, and you're making us look bad.
Well, that's where scholars have to come into the conversation. We need the economists. We need the historians. We need the political scientists. We need all of those people that study this in mass, the sociologists. We need those people to come to the forefront, and they need to be working hand in hand with the activists and the organizers. And because, and I've said this before, in my mind, you're not a real activist if you don't either know or have connection to people who know the actual statistics and the history of the situation. You're just somebody out here making noise and getting in the way.
Yeah. And we don't need no more of that because it's not working. It's not working. It's okay to have the information. It's okay to have the activists. It's okay to have all these things, but we have to use it constructively. If what we're doing ain't working, then damn it, don't do that. Pick the good parts that have worked, keep that, everything else, throw it away, and look at something different. Once again, I'm gonna keep saying this. Also, I don't think just because this black person, this historical black person is your favorite person, I don't think we should just lock in on that person's information, that person's point of view, that person's idea. What did other people say? What did other people think about? What did other people do? What worked? What didn't work? It's a whole puzzle piece. All of these people are pieces of the puzzle. All we doing is using this platform to try to put these puzzle pieces together from what everybody's saying. But when you're looking at it from that closed-minded view, you're gonna miss the forest, the whole forest, because focusing on one tree. And yes, that person is excellent. Yes, they have great information. But guess what? So do everybody else. But the way you are consuming that information, the way we're consuming that information, ain't working. Let's look at other perspectives. Get the book, use the book, read the book, but get other information as well. So yeah.
Also, which is very important for our discussion today, is the word race means being in competition. See, they didn't pick house, tree, car. They said racism. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we are in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete or survive, or not compete and perish.
Hey, we're not competing. And the sad part right now, we are not competing because we are literally waiting on white people to decide to not be racist no more. And that shit ain't working for us. It's not.
And if we really sit back and think about it, why would it? What like and this is a question I ask a lot. If black people were in the power position and white people were in the black position, would we do any different?
Well,
No, we wouldn't. No. I'm
I'm
just go
because
ahead and say
no. I'm we wouldn't do different. But what I'm thinking that I had to think about that because I'm thinking about a group of black people though who don't have the mindsets that we have, because the group of black people who have the mindsets that we have would definitely do different. These the same folk who white people can commit terroristic atrocities, and then 2 days later or a day later, 30 minutes later, certain black people want to forgive them.
well, yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, you look at it, even to that. Look at the way a black person that has money looks at other black people without money.
Right.
How many
Inappropriate
black
behavior.
Yeah, right. How many black millionaires and well, we can't say it like it's a bunch of them, but
Right.
how many black people with money are actually going back into the hood and actually doing everything in their power to turn that situation around for those people in that environment?
Most of the black people who have money, have any type of money, any type of resources that are usually going back into the hood on a regular basis, are the ones who might not be the best ones to go back into the hood. Or you sometimes are the ones who messing up the hood. That's where they getting their money from. But though they are in the communities, because the professionals, or the going back to the idea of the talented 10th, it's not working for us. The inappropriate behavior is on full display. Like our international images are not favorable. I'm um I was watching the video earlier today, and I don't know what African countries these ladies were from, but it was a group of African women having a round table discussion about how their parents told them to not interact with Black Americans when they get here.
I've heard that a lot.
You know, so and I'm saying that because we need Black people on a global scale to really be as powerful as we need to be, because racism is on white supremacy is on a global scale. I keep telling everybody, you can't outrun this. You got to defeat it. You can't outrun it, you got to defeat it. So Black people, I still believe Black people in America, we got to get our stuff together first. Then things start happening from there. But we have to make that decision. But we have to fix our behavior. We have to choose to do better. We have to wake up every morning with the mindset that I'm going to be a better Black person. I'm going to be better for my family. I'm going to be better for my community. I'm going to be better for my city, my county, all these things, and start to work together. We have to rebuild the trust that we used to have. We got to take care of our health. We got to make sure we take care of our wealth. We have to take care of our family. We have to take care of our minds. We have to do a whole holistic reset on how we exist in this world. Our diets definitely need to change. We can't look, we ain't in the position. If white people decided tomorrow that they want to look up and just just bomb on us, are we in the physical positions to defend ourselves? No, because inappropriate behavior. So we got to just look at everything how we exist. But like you said, inappropriate behavior and that maldistribution of wealth are two great things that really, really, really hurt us. That maldistribution of wealth leads to a lot of the communal ills that we have. We don't have no money, we don't have no resources. When people don't have money and resources, rob, steal, borrow.
Which is an extended spiel.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
But
But not the only thing I would add to that is, or the only thing I would change about what you just said is, I wouldn't say white supremacy is global. I would say black inferiority is global.
okay, and expand, please. Just
Just
for the
because white supremacy is going to exist where white people are dominant in power, mainly America and Europe, places
Mhm.
like that. But if you go to Asia, you still dealing with black inferiority, but you're not
True.
dealing with white supremacy no more. Now
Right.
you're dealing with Asian superiority,
That's true.
Asian supremacy. And so no, to me, it's no matter where you go, you're always going to be dealing with black inferiority, even if you go to various places in Africa. You're not going to be dealing necessarily with white supremacy or Asian supremacy, although we know they're there and they exist. You're still going to be dealing with in that system, depending on where you are, very specific and nuanced cases of Black American inferiority. So you're going to be dealing with black inferiority no matter where you go.
Yeah. So we got, I mean, that's something internal that we got to fix for ourselves. We have to do more than just talk about being blessed, being kissed with this sun and all these things, and this melanin and all these things. It sound good. It sound good, but what are we doing? What are we actually doing with it? So let's stop just sounding good and actually be good at what we do, because we changing our tune and we changing the way we exist. Powernomics, Dr. Claude Anderson. Make sure you go get it. Link in the description. Black Labor, White Wealth, Dr. Claude Anderson. Link in the description. The Chasm by Patrick. Link in the description. Also in the description, I'm linking information from blackdemographics.com about African American employment, underemployment, and black-owned businesses. And I'm also linking a Federal Reserve report that is talking about, it's a 2020 report on disparities in wealth by race and ethnicity in America. So I'm putting all that information in the description. Click on the links, read the information. We have to empower ourselves with information. And like Dr. John Henry Clark said, read everything. I don't care who wrote it. Read everything. We have to be informed about everything. And just because the person is black who put the information out don't necessarily mean the information ain't true, right? So, and also, if you can't present no counter information, why are you challenging it? You know what I'm saying? But read everything, empower ourselves, so that way we have more information and more knowledge to go off of to better fix our situations. So with that being said, I'm Joseph Ward. He's Patrick Irvin. www.ontheshoulders1.com. You see it at the bottom of the screen. Patreon.com/OTSOG. You can support me there. And yeah, man, that's how we doing it. We love y'all. Catch this next video that's coming up, and see y'all next week.